In this presentation today, we're going to be looking at nonverbal communication. This corresponds with the fourth chapter of the textbook, Human Communication. As we think in terms of nonverbal communication is defined as the process of using messages other than words to create meaning with others. So, for example, we use nonverbal communication in order to repeat a verbal message. We may use nonverbal communication to emphasize something that we've said. We can use nonverbal communication to complement verbal messages. We can also use nonverbal communication to contradict verbal messages, as well as to substitute for verbal messages themselves. And finally, we can use nonverbal communication in order to regulate conversation. So, for example, in talking about nonverbal communication, we talk about the importance of eye contact in regulating conversation or in regulating a message. I'm sure we're all familiar with those looks that we receive from our parents or from teachers in school, or sometimes even from our peers, from our siblings, those gestures or those looks that gave us a pause as to what we were saying or what we were doing. So here are some basic general ideas on nonverbal communication entitled 12 Examples of Nonverbal Communication. Let's see what we can pull together from this presentation.
12 nonverbal communication examples and how to use them. We usually think that body language is the only way that we can send a message without using words. But it's just one aspect of nonverbal communication, and these 12 examples will boost your people analysis skills. In this video, you will find out the 3 types of hand gestures, a secret that eyes reveal, and how communication goes way beyond your body. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and I help you uncover the secrets that people try to hide from you. Number 1, your general posture. No matter if you're standing or seated, your body posture is the first clue to reveal your current mood. That's one of the quickest ways to assess someone's feelings in just a couple seconds, thanks to their global body language. One example is alpha and beta postures. One of them projects confidence and the other insecurity. You can even feel more confident by just assuming an alpha posture. The easiest way to tell the difference is the way the shoulders are broad and relaxed in one, or tense and contract in the other. Number 2, facial expressions of emotions. We're naturally drawn to see faces, and that's why it's the most important area when we want to express emotions without words. Most of the time we pick those signals by intuition, but with a little practice you can spot them consciously. One example is when someone presses their lips. You know that they have an emotional reaction. Our faces can show 7 basic emotions, but it's more important if you can spot these more subtle changes. I recommend that you get used to pay attention to faces during the conversation. Number 3, illustrator gestures to emphasize words. When someone uses their hands to make their point clearer, those are called illustrator gestures. They're very important because they help the other person understand and remember your words and connect deeper with them. For example, if you're saying that something is big or tall, or try to emphasize the point that your hands move in unison. Every time your hands support what you're saying, you're using illustrator gestures. They're very easy to detect because people almost never try to hide them. Number 4, voice tone and volume. Another nonverbal communication example that usually doesn't get enough attention is the quality of our voice. Unless people know how to control their emotions, their voice is going to be the first channel that reveals their inner state. For example, when someone is excited or upset, they're going to raise their voice. If they feel insecure, they will lower it. This is great news because this way you can detect someone's emotions without even having to look at them. You just have to practice active listening whenever you can. Learning to spot these nonverbal communication signals requires a bit of practice and knowing where to look. That's why I've summarized more than 90 body language clues in a free ebook that you can download right now. You can find the link in the description or right here. Number 5, manipulator gestures that reveal stress. If illustrator gestures emphasize words, manipulator gestures reveal an emotional reaction to a situation. You can spot them because they add absolutely nothing to the message that the person wants to convey. There are many examples like rubbing the eyes, pulling the earlobe, touching the nose. Those are manipulator gestures. They are not directly related to lying, but instead to some emotional discomfort. If you're paying attention at the person's body language, you should have no problem spotting them. Number 6, clothing and accessories. As I said before, nonverbal communication is not only about body language, because the way people dress gives clues about their personality. And the best question you can ask in your mind is, what kind of person chooses to dress this way? Some people claim that the way they dress has nothing to do with their personality, and that's wrong. Because in most cases, they choose what to wear. It's a decision that they make. So it's a matter of reverse engineering that decision to make a Sherlock Holmes guess about their character. Number 7, the secrets in their eyes. I know that eyes are part of facial expressions, but they reveal so much information that you could just focus on them. After all, they call the windows to the soul, and for a good reason. We can express emotions just moving them. Whether it's rolling our eyes, or we notice that someone is blinking faster, or someone points in the direction of another with their gaze. All those are signals that we give away even if we cover our entire face. It's not a coincidence that we're always drawn to see other people's eyes. Number 8, proxemics and interaction distance. Different cultures have different customs about how close do people stand to each other when talking or just hanging out. But at the same time, those differences in interaction distance can reveal what kind of relationship they have. Proxemics is also about the way our gestures reach out to the other person during a conversation. If you see two people talking and they don't have problems sharing that personal space, then you know they feel comfortable. This can be spotted not only in couples but also in groups. Number 9, custom hand gestures or emblems. By now you've noticed that there's much more to hands than just a few gestures to emphasize our words. There are also emblems that are hand gestures with a certain meaning that is given by the culture or society. For example, the OK sign or the thumbs up are emblems that have meaning even if you just see an isolated hand. Just remember that the same emblems can have different meanings in different cultures, so be careful. When you visit other countries, it's a good idea to know in advance about this. Number 10, our personal space. If the way we dress can reveal details about our personality, our living and working spaces also give a nonverbal message. That's why it's important to pay attention to someone's house or apartment or office to see what can give us information about them. Do they have plans? What kind of books do they have? Do they have pictures, posters, paintings? It's a good practice to reverse engineer someone's personal space to make a guess about their character. And one of the most important clues that we can get is, what do they like? Number 11, haptics and touching others. No matter the culture, there are always going to be people who like to touch others and people who really hate to be touched. But for example, the handshake is one of the most common forms of touching, and you can tell a lot from someone's grip. You can put a hand on someone's shoulder or back to show support. And there's the fact that a woman can do a very soft touch of her own arm to attract the attention of a man. So the act of touching is in itself an nonverbal clue, no matter if it's a formal greeting or a warm hug. Number 12, physical reactions. When we talk about revealing emotions, these are the hardest to conceal body language signals. And since they're connected directly to the central nervous system, there is almost nothing that we can do to control them. We're talking about sweating, pupils dilating, shortness of breath, blushing, and so on. Most of these reactions are automatic and they reveal an emotional reaction. Maybe the person feels threatened. The only way to control them would be to control your own emotions in advance. The main takeaway about all these nonverbal communication examples is that none of them is more important than the others. What's more, you should always consider the context of the interaction to get a full understanding. My suggestion is that you try to spot one by one at first. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, so practice by focusing on one for a whole week and then add another. Of course, it will always be a dynamic of comparing their nonverbal communication signals with what they are saying to spot inconsistencies. And that's when you will start detecting hidden emotions. Again, if you want all my free nonverbal communication tips, there's a link in the description to download my ebook. And don't forget to subscribe and activate those notifications so you don't miss any of my body language analysis and tips. See you next time! that we can send a message without.
All right. That's a pretty good overview of nonverbal communication. So basically, as we go back through the presentation, our presentation, we can pick up on some of the things that he pointed out in the video. First of all, I think one code communicates a variety of meanings. That's one of the things that he pointed out. And also a variety of codes can have the same meaning. We talk about nonverbal codes, we talk about bodily movement, oftentimes referred to as kinesics, and facial expressions. He talked about gestures as emblems. He talked about illustrator gestures. He talked about gestures which we use to display affection for someone else. In addition, bodily movement can also, and facial expressions, really good points that he made in the presentation about the importance of eye contact and some of the facial expressions that we make. For example, I didn't really think about the pressing together of the lips, but the pressing together lips, the furrowing of the eyebrows can give you an idea of what somebody's thinking, or somebody's questioning perhaps what you had to say. We also talk about nonverbal communication. We also talk about bodily movements. Bodily movements can display a liking. They can also display status. One of the things he talked about in the presentation was the alpha body posture versus the beta posture. The alpha one displays an idea of superiority or strength, and the other a weakness or apprehension. We also think in terms of responsiveness. We also think in terms of our own physical attractiveness and what attracts others to us as well as ourselves to others. Another thing that is mentioned in the presentation today was space or proxemics. One of the concepts we talk about sometimes is that of territoriality. Oftentimes we think about animals who stake out their territory or mark their territory, but we human beings have the same tendency to do the same thing. So for example, if you can think of two little kids in the back seat of a car, and one as they're in a car ride with their parents, and Mom, he's touching me. That kind of territoriality, that kind of space issue comes into place. But even as adults we do this. Think in terms of where you are sitting now in a classroom or where you always sit. That becomes your spot. That is your territory. Or where you always park your car. That is your territory, your spot. So we have personal spaces, and we also are we also have I messed up here. Spatial intimate distance, which is 0 to 18 inches, or personal distance, which is usually 18 inches to 3 feet. Social distance, 3 to 6 feet. And finally, public distance, which is above 6 feet in what we like to do. One of the things he didn't mention in the video was the use of time as non-verbal communication. And we talk about time as chronemics. We're talking about two kinds of time. The first is monochronic time, and the second is polychronic time. Monochronic time means is the kind of use of time where you do one thing at a time. And polychronic is where you can do many things at the same time. So we talk about people who are multitaskers, may be more polychronic, or may see time not quite in the same structure and tightness that we sometimes do in American culture, but very loose. For the rest of us, there is monochronic time, which is very set and paced and very isolated in how we see time. Again, his presentation, he mentioned haptics, the use of touch, and some of the things that we talk about when we talk about touch, and the importance, for example, of touch and ritual, and how those play an important role in our rituals. Think, for example, before we were dealing with COVID-19, the shake of the hand, or friends hugging or those kinds of things, or hugging a loved one, or somebody you're closely have close intimacy with. Those are all part of a ritual that we carry out in how we use time, or how we use touch. And then another part of nonverbal communication, also one he did not mention in the video, or didn't allude to, and that is the use of the voice. So think of somebody who is very excited and their voice may go up in pitch, or somebody who's very serious and that voice lowers in its intensity. Rate of speed. It seems to me that when we are nervous, we tend to speak a little faster than when we are confident. Inflection, how we emphasize certain words or certain syllables in words in how we speak. Use of volume, use of quality of our voice, as use of also non-word sounds like those kinds of words which are non-word sounds. Also, in thinking in terms of vocalics or voice cues, we can talk about pronunciation, articulation, and enunciation. Pronunciation is when you say a word correctly, while articulation is whether or not your mouth, tongue, and teeth are coordinated together in order to be understandable to others. And enunciation is whether or not you combine pronunciation and articulation and distinction so that others can understand what you mean. So for example, somebody who mumbles is one who does not enunciate clearly and who is difficult to understand. We could also mention the use of silence as nonverbal communication, as well as clothing and artifacts and objects. I wanted to just touch upon pronunciation and enunciation correctly. Let's take for the first word here on the screen the word S-O-F-T. It's pronounced soft with the T pronounced. Some people will say soft. Another word is the word O-F-T-E-N. And again, there's a couple of different ways that people pronounce that word. One is often, emphasizing the T, and the other is often. The correct way is often with the T being silent. Or thinking, for example, the word comfortable. Some people mispronounce the word and they say comfortable. I can't even mispronounce it. Comfortable. They leave out the comfortable. Instead of emphasizing the syllables, they reduce syllables. Or the word temperature. Some people just say temperature, and they leave out parts of the symbol. So again, to say things correctly is an important way of communicating. It adds to your credibility, especially when we're talking about speaking in more formal or more professional roles. Various ways that we can improve our nonverbal communication. Number one is in understanding the context that we're in, knowing who our audience is, knowing how to provide appropriate feedback. Also being able to demonstrate interest and with both our eyes and body contact, using our time properly as well. So some things that can help us become better at nonverbal communication: managing our time efficiently. So for example, if you promise to do something in a manner of time, you want to make sure that you perform that task in time, or that if you have an appointment or a schedule, that you keep that schedule in order to respect other people's time as well. How you exchange exchange talk time, using some of the pragmatics of communication. Also follow professional norms and avoid overly dramatic behaviors in your nonverbal communication. Also understanding that there are cultural differences in the way that we communicate. And so we need to have consistent use of space, understanding how our culture uses space as well as how other cultures may use space. Emphasis on verbal messages, emblem use for less formal messages, improving our eye contact skills, and then bigger vocal characteristics, knowing how to modulate our voice, knowing how to speak properly and correctly. So those are some of the overviews on nonverbal communication. I would definitely encourage you, if you've not done so yet, to please go over these things in the 4th chapter as you prepare for further examination on nonverbal communication. Thank you.